Okay, class, as we start actually getting into the dissection of the muscular system, these videos, what I'm going to try to do, especially when I have bilateral areas that I'm working on, I am going to try and have one half dissected and ready to go, and then work through and show you how I've done that on the other side. So we will start with the pectoral musculature. And as you can see, all of our chest and pectoral musculature is actually sitting on top of the rib cage, and it's going to angle up to the humerus. All right. And depending on where it attaches to the sternum, we're going to see the angle change. So if it's fairly low, you're going to see quite an angle coming up to the humerus. As you get closer to the top, it's basically coming straight across the chest. So, muscles that we're going to be responsible for, you're going to be responsible for, include the xipha humeralis, the pectoralis major, the pectoralis minor, and the pecto antebrachialis. Some of those are probably familiar to you, some of them maybe not so much. So let's go ahead and look through them individually and give you an idea as to why they have their names. So the xipha humeralis actually starts at the bottom of the sternum where the xiphoid process is. So it gets its name from the xiphoid process, going from its origin to its insertion on the humerus. Okay? And this particular cat has some very good lines that are easy to see. Not all of them are going to be quite as easily laid out. So it is going to be important for you to, if you have a specimen that does not have good identifiable lines, or it has a fair amount of connective tissue that sits over top of it, it's going to be good for you to visit some of the other students in class and take a look at some of the other specimens. So this xipha humeralis, actually you can see the edge of it or the boundary of it right here. All right, because this was cut into slightly and is not as identifiable on this side, I used this side to dissect out prior to making the video. So, and as you see, this is a fairly thin layer and you can get underneath it. As you get underneath these layers, they're all held together by connective tissue. It really is very cobwebby and very easily separated. Okay? So you can see the boundary of it here. And what I've done on this side is I've identified the lower boundary of the pectoralis minor. And you can see that right here. And the easiest way to do this, what you want to do is just separate. And what I'm doing is I'm just sort of scraping along, scratching at this connective tissue. And it'll start to separate. Some use this particular tool. Others prefer to use the tip of the scalpel. And I flip that over so that I'm not actually cutting into. And with this particular dissection, I have not cut in any of the muscles. So you can be very light and gentle going across that, and it will start to separate. And it'll help you to identify it out or draw it out. Okay? So this is the xipha humeralis. Comes right along here. Comes up to the humerus. Above that is the pectoralis minor. Now, in cats, this is actually the bigger of the two pectoral muscles, as opposed to in humans. So, pectoralis minor comes right here. You can see I've identified it. I've dissected it out. You can also see over on this side another line. So what you're looking for is color variations. And that line is fairly easy to see in this particular cat. And it comes up, it goes underneath this muscle, and we'll get to that in a moment. All right. So as you start to kind of tease that away, and you want to be gentle, all right, we don't want to create artificial muscle boundaries that don't actually exist. All right, and you can get underneath that as I have here. You can start to see and start to get underneath that actual muscle. Okay. All right, and then we move on up. Here is the pectoralis major. It's a small triangle. It actually sits underneath this muscle partially as well. Okay. So pectoralis major is here. You can see that lower boundary here. You can see the upper boundary as it comes straight across. All right. And it is covered by the pecto antebrachialis. Pecto antebrachialis actually sits on the pectoral muscles. So that's where the pecto comes from. Anti means before, sitting on top of, and brachialis means arm. So this is coming from the chest, going to the arm. And you'll see the lower boundary of it here, as I identified earlier with the pec major, and the upper boundary, and this one is sometimes difficult to find on some cats. It popped out really well here on this side, and you can sort of see it along the top here. Okay, so what you're going to need to do is basically separate out these muscles so they're very easily identified. So just a quick review again to go back through it. So at the bottom you have the xiphi humerus, you have the pectoralis minor, you have the pectoralis major, and you have the pecto antebrachialis. So make sure that you review those. As we move on to other sections of the cat, it'll be important for you to come back frequently and take a look at those just as a review. If not, what's going to happen is that, being one of the first muscular dissections we get to, if you leave it be and don't come back frequently, it is going to get covered up by some of the other muscles that we have. So make sure that you are reviewing frequently. Next one we will get to, we'll move on to the abdominal cavity, or not to the abdominal musculature, not the abdominal cavity.